Hi. Today we are going to do a booktube classic video, and that is the mid-year book freakout tag. The mid-year book freakout tag is one of my favorite tags ever. I have loved watching booktubers do this tag. I am excited to finally participate in the mid-year book freakout tag. This tag was created years and years ago. If I can find the original creator, I will link it below because they definitely deserve credit for making one of the best book tags ever. I cannot believe we are midway through 2024 already. When I think back, I can't remember a single thing that I've done, to be honest. The first half of the year kind of just blends into one big blur. All I know is that I read a ton of books in the first half of 2024. I'm already at 93 books. These are the books that have made it onto this list. I tried to pick different authors and different books for each question so that I wouldn't repeat any. Some of these will overlap, I will say, and there's no way that I could just pick one book or one author for some of these questions. I definitely cheated and chose multiple. So the first question is the best book you've read so far this year. And this was really tough to pick, but for the best book that I've read so far this year that I can't stop thinking about, absolutely fell in love with the writing, the characters, the world building, the story blew me away. I have to say that crown goes to my queen, M.L. Wang, with Blood Over Bright Haven. Oh my God. Like I said, I still think about this book to this day. I think about it at least once a day. M.L. Wang is the queen of fantasy standalone books. I read her other standalone, The Sword of Kaigen, which I have to say is probably one of my favorite books of all time. It took me a while to read this. I think this actually came out last year, but I didn't read it until this year because The Sword of Kaigen broke me in so many ways, and I knew M.L. Wang was gonna break me again with this book, and she did. And I knew it. That's why I was like, I'm gonna take my time and wait a little bit, give myself some grace before I jump back into her work. This book follows two main characters. The first, we have Siona, who is a mage studying magic. She makes it into the High Magistry, and in this world, the High Magistry are basically just a group of very talented, gifted, and powerful mages that run the world. And she's also the first woman who's ever made it into the High Magistry and become a High Mage. The world, oh God, what was the world called? I think it was called Tehran. There's this sort of dome that is protecting Tehran from the outside world and like outside forces and magic. And the High Magistry is the one powering the energy for this dome to protect Tehran. Then we follow Tamil or Tamil, who is he used to be a hunter and native to an indigenous tribe that lived outside of Tehran, so outside the dome, and his whole clan was wiped out from this magical storm that happens where like lightning strikes and basically just causes the person that gets struck with lightning to literally just melt away. And him and his niece make it through Tehran, and they've lived there. They're the only survivors of their clan. Tamil works at the High Magistry, where Siona now works, and they both cross paths and their lives intertwine as they unmask the bigger evil in this world. The magic system in this is so unique. It's basically done through this machine that's like programming or coding, and that's how that magic is done. Like Siona, when she was testing to get into the High Magistry, had to calculate the perfect degree and like percentage and value to make a certain object levitate. And it was just so unique, and I have never read any magic system like this. Both of the characters are very rooted in their beliefs and come from complete opposite sides of the good versus evil in this world. And you see that both of them challenge each other on those beliefs, and that causes them to open their minds and their eyes to what is actually happening behind the veil of what they've been told. The character development is incredible. The world building, fantastic. The soul-sucking, heart-wrenching gut punch that M.L. Wang always gives you at the end of her books, fucking slapped in this. This ruined me. It blew my mind. It was fucking fantastic. Like I said, I still think about this at least once a day. Absolutely incredible. If you've never read ML Wang before, you need to get into her books. This was incredible and probably will be one of the best books that I read for the rest of the year. The next question is the best sequel you've read so far this year, and that has to go to Raven Song by TJ Klune. This is the second book in the Green Creek series. This is an urban paranormal fantasy romance series that takes place in a small town called Green Creek, and it is about the Bennett clan, who is a clan of werewolves, and all of the interrelationships within the clan and their relationships with the outside world. This series spans 4 books, and each book is about a different couple. They're all MM. There is an overarching plot that ties all 4 books together. This is the second book in the series, and it is the romance between the witch for the Bennett clan, Gordo, and Mark Bennett, he used to be the second in command, and his older brother, Thomas, used to be the alpha. And I think he is still the beta, I believe. I don't even remember because there's so much that happens in this series. So much that happens. But literally one of the best series I've ever read in my life. Probably my favorite paranormal series I've ever read. It is absolutely fantastic. TJ Klune perfected the found family trope. I was so wrapped up in this series and the characters in this. I binged all 4 books, I think in a month, but this was definitely my favorite out of the series. The love between Gordo and Mark, oh my god, there's so much angst because it is technically second chance and something pulled them apart, and you see the anger and the rage and the grudge that each of them felt for their circumstance that pulled them apart. TJ Klune does not hold back any punches. These two have to work through their struggle and the emotional turmoil that they both go through because they obviously are mated and they love each other and they want to be together, but they're so hurt and cannot get over what happened in the past. Each book is so unique in the voice of the characters and the minds of the characters that you follow. But my god, the way that he is able to pull your heartstrings and make you feel everything for these characters. I sobbed, first of all, and I really had to collect myself together at the end of this and just take a deep breath and touch grass because wow, did I get lost in this world. But absolutely fantastic. My favorite book in the series. Definitely the best sequel I've read this year. I don't know if I'm going to read a better sequel than this, but we'll see. The next question is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year. I have a few answers for this. I mean, there's so many good books coming out and a lot of them by my favorite authors, so I can't just pick one. The first one I'm really excited about is Play Along by Liz Tomford. This is the 4th book in the Windy City series, my favorite sports romance series ever. So I'm excited for that. And then the next book that I actually already have a copy of because I think it came out in the UK and Europe already, but it hasn't released here in the States. This is the Waterstone edition, so I think it is released there, but in the States it's not getting released until September. But I already have it. I haven't read it yet, but I'm excited for this. I read Cleopatra and Frankenstein at the beginning of this year, and that is one of my favorite books of all time. That made me fall in love with Coco Malors, and so I'm very excited to dive into this. This is a top priority. Then I have Graveyard Shift by ML Rio, which I'm dying to read. I'm waiting to see if I get approved for the arc of it on NetGalley. ML Rio wrote If We Were Villains. I can't even talk about that book without getting emotional because that book was my life. It is my personality. I need to inject this book into my veins. I will read anything this woman writes. The last book that I'm most excited about is Throne of Secrets by Carrie Maniscalco. I read Throne of the Fallen. Yeah, Throne of the Fallen. It was one of the first books I read this year and probably hands down one of the best romantasy books I've read. And I've read a lot and most of them do not hit. Most of them suck. This is the one romantasy I genuinely enjoyed because of the perfect balance it had of fantasy and romance. And the characters were fun and they were morally gray. I loved it. I had a fantastic time. I can't wait to get to the second book. The next question is the biggest disappointment so far this year. Yeah, this is gonna be controversial, but the biggest disappointment I read this year, I've read a few, but the biggest one personally to me, because I love this author, would have to be Funny Story by Emily Henry. And I can't believe I'm saying that, but because she is one of my favorite authors and an author that I've read every single book of, I obviously had high expectations. And I think I need to stop going into Emily Henry's book with such high expectations because to me, nothing has been able to top Book Lovers. I did enjoy Happy Place. but I didn't love it as much as book lovers. I thought I was going to love Funny Story and that it would be another favorite of mine, but that was not the case. I did enjoy it. I rated it 4 stars. Emily Henry is a very incredible storyteller. She writes really easily digestible romance books. I would say she leans a little bit more towards women's fiction with romance included in her story. The only thing is, I'm begging her to write dual POV because staying in Daphne's head the entire book, I couldn't do it. There were times where Daphne was very whiny, and there were also some plot points that didn't make sense, and there were some conflicts that could have been resolved in a more mature way if the characters had just communicated, and miscommunication is my last straw. All of those combined ended up making Funny Story my biggest disappointment for 2024 so far. The next question is the biggest surprise so far this year, and that has to be, without a doubt in my mind, The Book of Doors by Gareth Brown. This is so underrated and underhyped. People need to get into it. This is a fantasy standalone, one of my favorite books of the year. It was between choosing this or Blood Over Brighthaven, but this does fall more into the biggest surprise category because I was not expecting to A, love this as much as I do, and B, for it to be this fucking fantastic. And it's a debut novel. In this book, we are following Cassie Andrews, who works at a bookstore in New York City. One of her favorite customers comes in, and unfortunately, he passes away at one of the tables at the bookstore. And he leaves her a book on the table. In it, there's a note that says specifically that this book is for her. He left it there for her. It's a book she's never heard of, a book she's never seen before, and it is called The Book of Doors. Cassie doesn't know that this book has magical powers, and this literally opens a new world for her. The Book of Doors is just one of many rare books that hold magical powers, and this specific Book of Doors is very rare, and a lot of people have been hunting for this specific book and searching for this book high and low around the world for a long time. People will literally kill for this book. Cassie and her friend end up in this sort of cat and mouse chase, running away from all these bad guys that want to take the book from her and use it for bad guy reasons. There's time travel, and you see how the actions and decisions of the characters that you follow in this book affect different events to come, and then in the end you see how it all comes together. It was just absolutely phenomenal. I don't want to say too much. It's definitely a book that, like me, you should go in without any expectations and knowing little about it, because it will blow you away. It's fun, it's adventurous, it was fast paced, you follow multiple character POVs. There's this overarching plot that comes together. There's found family, there's actually a lot of gory scenes in it. Like there's some fight scenes that end up being pretty graphic. There's just a little bit of everything in this. So this was definitely a big surprise. I was not expecting to fall in love with this the way that I did, but I will definitely read anything this author comes out with now. Like I said, it was a standalone, but I hope there are more. Like I want to read more and stay in this world. I want to read more about the other books that have magical elements to them, but for now, it seems like this is a standalone, but I definitely could see this being expanded more into a bigger series following the different books. Other than that, fantastic, phenomenal, absolutely love this book. All right, next question is new favorite author. These two authors that I'm going to mention, their books were gut-wrenching. I loved them. Their writing styles were different from each other, but still so compelling and captivating that it made these two books stand out to me apart from everything else that I've read this year. And that is Ella Lee, who wrote Jaded, and also Kaveh Akbar, who wrote Martyr. Jaded is about a half Turkish, half Korean woman who is a lawyer at a law firm and ends up getting sexually assaulted by her coworker. And this book is about her accepting and coming to terms with what happened to her and all of the events that happened after that and grappling with the aftermath of that event, not just mentally and emotionally, but the way that it has affected her relationships with her partner, with her friends, with her immigrant parents, and also herself. The way that Ella wrote this, being in the mind of someone going through a trauma like this, was unlike anything I'd ever read before. It was so surreal. Everything that Jade went through felt so raw and just so human. She didn't make the smartest decisions at times, but she made the best decisions to her capabilities given her situation. And I think that humanized her and made her incredibly real to me. And the way that Ella wrote Jade's vulnerability hit me in a way that just it hit me so hard. This story was so impactful, and like I couldn't stop thinking about it for weeks after. The way it ended too, it didn't wrap up in this pretty neat bow with a perfectly happy ending. It ended in a very realistic way, and I think that mirrors not only the story but also the main character as well. Absolutely incredible. Loved this book. Martyr, the most unique storytelling ever. In this book you follow Cyrus Shams. He's a poet and he's seeking the answer into what makes a worthy death. He is newly sober, he's grappling with mental illness and a lot of trauma too. You don't just follow him, you also follow the history of certain family members in his life and how it has affected Cyrus in present day, and it's told in different perspectives. There are certain chapters where it's told with this sort of magical realism element through dreams and different conversations with random fictional characters. Like it was just a very interesting and unique way. The pacing too, there were times where it was slow and there are times where it was very fast paced and action packed depending on the person and the timeline that we were following. And then at the end, there is a plot twist that honestly blew my mind. I was not expecting it. I didn't see it coming. I'm not the person who can pick up crumbs on the way to a plot twist. Sorry, I'm very gullible in that way, but it blew my mind. Kind of like Jaded, it didn't have a satisfying happy ending that like wraps up in this perfect bow. It kind of still leaves you wanting more and feeling a little bit unsatisfied, but I fucking loved this. So humorous as well. There are so many times where I laughed out loud, and it kind of just has that dry self-deprecating humor, which I love. And these are two authors that I'll definitely be reading anything that they come out with for years to come. The next question is newest fictional crush. The shitty thing about this year is that I haven't read a lot of romance and dark romance, but I will say, and this might be a little bit predictable, but I will say Justin from Just for the Summer. I loved how honest he was as a character. Like he definitely communicated his feelings to, what is the female main character's name? I don't even remember her name. He never hid his feelings from her. He was very understanding and compassionate. He had me giggling and kicking my feet. And Abby Jimenez always writes really fantastic heroes that have emotional depth to them, and for the most part, mature enough to communicate to the best of their abilities. I won't say it's perfect, but they try their best. I have to say he's like the only character I can think of that I would have a crush on out of all the characters that I've read this year. So yeah, Justin from Just for the Summer. Newest favorite character goes to Ray from The Violent Conspiracy. This book had me in utter shambles. This is a book about Ray, who is a Black kid and has an absolute love and passion for classical music, and it is his dream to be a professional violinist. He is gifted a fiddle from his grandmother, and this fiddle was passed down to her from her grandfather, who used to be a slave, and was gifted this violin from the slave owner because he loved playing the fiddle so much that the owner decided to give it to him. And it turns out that this fiddle is actually a very, very, very rare Italian-made Stradivarius violin. It ends up being worth millions of dollars. Ray makes it into the Tchaikovsky competition, which is basically the Olympics of classical music. Not only is he one of the first Americans to make it, he's one of the first Black Americans to make it to that level of competition in classical music. And a few weeks before the competition, the violin gets stolen. And this is a book about figuring out who did it. But you also follow the history of Ray's life going up to that point and him making it to the Tchaikovsky competition. The amount of racism and microaggressions that Ray experienced as a Black man in professional performing arts, I can't even describe how furious it made me, just how devastating it was. He was so talented and so passionate about his love for music, his love for this fiddle, wanting to make his grandma proud of him. And he didn't just face backlash from you know, everyone in the community, he also faced it within his own family. His mom didn't believe him. She thought he was wasting his time pursuing a career in classical music. His family never took him seriously. It wasn't until they found out how much money he could make from performing and how much money the violin was worth that his family actually started paying attention. All of the things that Ray experienced, the way that people spoke to him, the condescension and the lack of support and encouragement that he received, you would have thought that he would have broken down and given up. But this man persevered and was determined to make it and prove everyone wrong. And he did it with such grace and humility. I have never, ever read a character handle all of that with as much dignity as Ray did. It made me emotional seeing the way that he still treated everyone around him with such kindness and compassion and understanding when he never received that himself. And there were times too where I was like, Ray, babe, this is one of those times where you have to talk back. This is one of those times where, you know, something needs to be done, something needs to be said. But it was so hard for him because performing arts and classical music, there's so much affluence around it. And you are surrounded by people who, if you're a Black man, they're expecting the worst from you. They don't want you there. You are not welcome there. And he had to walk in so many rooms like that and talk to so many people like that. He had only a handful of people in his corner that were rooting for him and that really believed in him. It was just so inspiring to see how the belief he had in himself and the fight that he had to make his life better and to want better for himself. It was incredible. It was inspiring. It was phenomenal. This was one of the best books I read this year. The author is Black and he also is a professional classical musician. And in his author note, he says that a lot of the experiences that Ray had in this were taken from his own experiences. I did not expect to be affected as much as I was when I read this. This book, I still think about it to this day. Absolutely incredible, amazing, you need to read it. Books that made me cry. How We Name the Stars by Andres and Ordorica. This is a coming of age story about Daniel DeLuna who goes to university. He was the first in his family to ever make it to college, and he starts a friendship with his college roommate Sam, and it blossoms into more. Anything historical and anything gay always makes me cry because it almost always ends in tragedy. I don't know what else to say about this book, but it fucking broke me apart and I absolutely fucking loved it. It was so fucking good. This is also, I think, a debut novel, and it's one of the books that was featured in Barnes & Noble, so that's why I picked it up, but still a favorite of mine this year. Loved it. Made me sob uncontrollably. A book that made me happy this year, No Reservations by Cheryl Lister. The premise of the story is sad because you're following four best friends who have been friends since they were children. They're sisters at this point. Now they're in their mid-40s. Some are married, some are divorced, some have kids. So you're following Joy, Diane, Rochelle, and Yvette. And Yvette ends up passing away from cancer. And her last gift to her friends is a trip to Jamaica because they all said they were going to go to Jamaica one day and relive the Jamaica trip that they took in college, but they never ended up taking that trip because of life, kids, marriage, family, all of that. Now that she's gone, she booked the trip for them. This is a book that is the saying, we were girls together in a book. The friendship in this, the true girls girl feeling, and just the love that these women have for each other, the way that they do life together, they are there for each other, they are there for each other's partner, they are there for each other's children. Oh my God, it was so phenomenal. The relationships in this, you have one character that's finding love, her romance, hot. Another that's having marital problems because she wants to branch out and take on this new business on her own, but her husband is not really supportive. You have another friend that wants to have kids, but her biological clock is ticking, and just the way that they are there for each other, they hold each other down. It was just so beautiful. It's so wholesome, and there is grief, but there's always that silver lining of hope. I absolutely love this. It made me so happy. This is definitely a book I will reread whenever I want a good pick-me-up and whenever I just want to feel like a warm hug. Perfect example of friendship and womanhood. Loved it. Love it. Okay, the last question is the most beautiful book you've bought or received this year. And to me, that's the most beautiful cover I bought this year. And the most beautiful cover of a book that I've bought this year is Dragon Fruit by Makia Lucier. This is a YA fantasy book that is inspired by Pacific Island mythology. And in it, you're following Hanalei, who's on the quest to find dragon fruit. Dragon fruit is the eggs of dragons, and they have healing and magical properties. I gave this 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. This is another book that I wasn't expecting to love because it was YA fantasy, and the one reason I bought it is because of the cover. Because look how fucking stunning that is. The imagery, oh my God, just beautiful, so tropical, colorful. This literally captures the entire vibe of the book. Absolutely loved it. This is stunning. And I really loved the book itself too, the story I really loved. Both beautiful outside and inside. Okay, so that was my mid-year book freakout tag all wrapped up. It was really fun to look back and reflect on all the books I've read so far. There are still a lot that I have to get to, and I can't wait to do my end of year wrap up. I had a lot of fun with this. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!